I grew up in two family businesses and very nearly walked away from everything. I came home one day and my wife was pregnant with our second child. My first child was playing on the kitchen floor. And I said out loud, I was exhausted, emotionally exhausted, physically exhausted, the whole lot. We'd been arguing for weeks over the course. We had an English language school, the courses, the technology, the market, like everything. Mm-hmm. And I sat down, I slumped down at the kitchen table and I said out loud for the first time, I need to leave the family business because if I don't, my kids will never see their grandparents because we won't be able to be in the same room as each other.
Correct.
And as soon as I said that, as soon as I verbalized that thought, which had been knocking around in my head for a couple of weeks, as soon as I said it, every cell in my body went, oh, no, a visceral reaction. And that's when I started down this road of going, okay, I can't be the first person to have this issue. How do we fix it?
Hello. Welcome to another episode of Adeptus On-Air. I am again your host, Mike Hoffman. And today I am joined by business consultant, advisor, and author, Stephen Shortt. Stephen, how you doing today?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me.
Good. I appreciate you coming on. So I'm talking to you from across the world right now, huh?
So yeah, I'm normally in Dublin, Ireland, but I'm actually even a little bit further away from you. I'm in Budapest right now.
Wow. How's the weather out there? 'Cause we're having some lousy weather in the States.
Well, I don't want to depress you, so I'll tell you honestly, we probably have the same weather here right now. I've just come back. I was doing a workshop in Sri Lanka last week, and I can tell you the weather in Sri Lanka and the weather in Budapest are not the same.
Well, it's funny. When I look about what I've done the past few weeks, I've gone from New Jersey to White Plains, New York. And then I look at what you've done the past few weeks. I think clearly you've had a much better travel itinerary than I have.
Well, definitely more interesting exotic locations for me, but I suspect shorter travel times for you.
Yeah, although you don't know East Coast traffic in the United States. So I don't want to say for sure, but you're probably right. Right. So I think it's really interesting because I know one of the things that you really focused on is the family business and the dynamics among families. And, you hear people say all the time, oh my God, why would you want to work with someone in your family? Or that's just a recipe for disaster. But it doesn't always have to be that way.
No, absolutely. But at the same time, I was nearly in the first camp. Maybe 16 years ago, I nearly walked away from it all. I grew up in two family businesses and very nearly walked away from everything. I came home one day and my wife was pregnant with our second child. My first child was playing on the kitchen floor. And I said out loud, I was exhausted, emotionally exhausted, physically exhausted, the whole lot. We'd been arguing for weeks over the course. We had an English language school, the courses, the technology, the market, like everything. Mm-hmm. And I sat down, I slumped down at the kitchen table and I said out loud for the first time, I need to leave the family business because if I don't, my kids will never see their grandparents because we won't be able to be in the same room as each other.
Correct.
And as soon as I said that, as soon as I verbalized that thought, which had been knocking around in my head for a couple of weeks, as soon as I said it, every cell in my body went, oh, no, a visceral reaction. And that's when I started down this road of going, okay, I can't be the first person to have this issue. How do we fix it? And now, 16 years later, well, actually 12 years later, I had bought both businesses. I sold one of the businesses. My wife and I sold our family home. We moved into my childhood family home. So we are 3 generations now in the same house. And we have Christmas dinner at the same table that I sat at saying I need to leave the family business. So it can work.
So when you started out on this venture, try and help other people with this as well, where do you start? Because obviously every family comes with different dynamics, different challenges, whether it's sibling rivalry, whether it's, parent favoritism. I'm sure I'm sure you've crossed all these different situations, but from what I've seen in every situation, oftentimes there's a denial aspect of it. Like, I don't have a favorite, or I'm not treating that person differently, when in fact, that's probably the root of the problem. So how do you A, dissect the problem, and B, get the parties involved to realize that there is a problem that they just might not be seeing?
So actually, sometimes having somebody like me come in and have those conversations, because if I'm a little bit blunt with people, or if I'm kind of holding up a mirror to people and reflecting back what's actually happening, I'm a third party. There's no baggage. I don't bring any baggage to it. So I'm able to have those conversations, and I'm able to ask those stupid questions because I don't know. So I'm trying to tease it out for people to be able to see stuff from a different perspective. But invariably, where I see most of the tension is within that, like the current generation, either not being able to let go of their identity or not being self-aware enough to know that they're the bottleneck.
Does it from the parent-child aspect first? What do you find it comes from? Is it reluctance to surrender something you've ran all your life? Is it lack of confidence in your kids? Is it a combination of both, or is it some other factor that you're seeing
So
more times than not? Obviously, like I said, everything's different.
yeah, so what I see an awful lot is it kind of touches the easy answer is to say I'm not sure that they're ready for this, but at the
Mhm.
same time, if you actually sit down with them and go back through their own journey, they weren't ready for it either. Like none of us are ever ready for entrepreneurship. It's you go in, it's scrappy, it's messy.
Yeah, yeah.
Where there is a difference though is the current generation have a lot more to lose, so they tend to be more risk averse than even they were 20 years ago or 30 years
Mhm.
ago when they were building this out. Because, and I've had this conversation with my own folks as well, if you're in your 60s, 70s, and you're looking at kind of going, okay, well, let's see what we do. What's the next stage of this? The inherent mentality is I don't have another 20. If this all goes in the toilet, I don't have another 20 years to build back up. I don't have the energy to do it. So I don't want to risk everything now and then have the next 10 years
Yeah.
of hardship like I had hustling in my 20s and 30s. Whereas the next generation, they might not have even grown up understanding the amount of hustle that went in 20 years ago.
Mhm.
The business is established, the businesses, it has its challenges and it has everything that it needs to develop, but they have a different view of the business. So then there's a different mindset. But one of the things that I really sit down with current generation entrepreneurs is what got you here is not going to get them there.
Right.
And the world is changing so much that we need to really conceptualize that. But actually, the bigger thing that I have that I come across is that the current generation entrepreneurs, their identity is so wrapped up in their role or their job that they are the CEO of this or the founder of this, that
Yeah.
if they're no longer that, what are they? And it's like contemplating your own death. And it is something which they struggle with. So I work with them a little bit on trying to figure out what's the next chapter for you? Like, where can you take those skills and how can you see yourself and how can you self identify?
Is part of it also just the parents or the older generation's feeling of this is my identity? This is what I've done for 30 or 40 years. Now
100%.
I pass it over to my kids, how am
What am
I
I?
spending my days? What am I
Yeah.
doing? Where's my value to the family, to the business, to
Mm-hmm.
society, things like that. And I
Yeah.
refer it back to, and it's a show in the US. I don't know if you've seen Modern Family. And that was a big
Yeah.
storyline in one season where he ran a closet business. The daughter took over, and there was that conflict because she thought it was because of a lack of confidence. Turns out it was him just not wanting to walk
Yeah.
away.
Absolutely. So what I liken it to is, for me, are you familiar with the hero's journey? The story, there's a book called The Story of a Thousand Faces. It's basically most modern stories follow this pattern of the hero's journey. The hero starts in the current world, the real world. Then they have a call to adventure, and then there is either a widget or a mentor or something, and then they go on this special journey. If you think of Star Wars, that was Yoda before Luke
Okay.
Skywalker went on it, and Dumbledore for Harry Potter and all this kind of stuff. Then there's the special world. And then when they're finished in the special world, they come back to the real world a changed and better person. So what I try to do is to get, because for me, I believe that entrepreneurship, the world of entrepreneurship is the special world for us entrepreneurs. It's a different place. There's lots of trials and tribulations and hopefully glory and
Yeah.
riches and all this kind of stuff. So what I want to do is get the current generation to come back from their hero's journey and then become the mentor to the next generation's hero's journey, because then they can take an awful lot of what they've learned, what they've accomplished, and they can have a different route where they can be sitting more in that mentor, advisor, sage role, not just for the family business, but also for the places where they can really add an immense amount of value and people that are hungry for that. But allow the next generation to have their turn in the special world on their own hero's journey.
But assuming the transition is even seamless, and if we're in a business where there's other employees and things like that, how does the next generation or the kid, get rid of the stigma as they didn't earn this? they were handed this. They're the boss's kid. Whatever
Yeah.
wherever you want to word it. Other people have worked hard to get to a level, and in an outside firm, you got to work your way up. And this was
Yeah.
basically, here you go, hand it to them.
So I face this myself. And the easiest way, there's two ways that people typically do this successfully. One is the next generation has to go and work outside of the family business for a minimum of 5 years in a comparable size. Maybe not a competitor necessarily, but something which is that they can understand the nuance of what's happening. And then they come in at the same level that they were able to achieve externally. Because the last thing that I would ever encourage people to do, and I would actively discourage this, is to go, oh, well, my son or daughter has an Instagram account, therefore they are the marketing director of the company. Like that, it's just not going to work.
Sure.
So if you're joining the family business, so in my case, I joined the family business pretty early. So I did a little bit of work outside, but I knew that this is what I wanted to do. So I started, I didn't really like it at the time, but I started as low as possible. I think I was the marketing assistant when I started out of college, kind of thing. So I was at the bottom. Now, as you're starting at the bottom and working your way up, as a family member, you're going to be getting a little bit more coaching. You're going to be getting a different type of mentoring and training that maybe other people in the organization hasn't. That's just a fact of it. But you still have to work your way up to make sure that you understand all the nuance and you earn your bones. Like there are people who have been in the company longer than you who might feel resentment and going, oh, they've just had an easy coast. But if you actually put in the work, then there's not really much they can say to you. If you've gone somewhere else and done the work somewhere else and come in, then you start at that level and again, work your way up.
Interesting. Now, in some situations, a family business might not just include, parents and kids, but could involve cousins, aunts, uncles. And there's always situations, you have, I don't want to say the black sheep of the family, it's not a fair term. You always have the one person who's there and just there to be there because they think it's safe, it's the family business.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to work hard. Uncle Jack's going to take care of me and so forth.
Yep.
How are those situations best handled? And I guess if it leads to a situation where that person is really hurting the company, how do you remove them from the business without really disrupting the family dynamic for not just the two parties involved, but the entire family as a whole?
So there's a whole framework that I built around successful succession, and it's the 5 Ps of successful succession. And typically when there is a problem, it's because the process before or the section before hasn't been properly dealt with. So it starts with purpose. What's the reason we're here? What's the short, medium, long term? What are we doing? What's the business here for? 1,000,001 different ways we can make money, legal and otherwise. Why are we spending our time doing this? Once we have a clear idea of what direction we're going in, then it's the pick. Who's the right person, whether it's the right person for the next 20 years, the next 10 years, the next 5 years, whatever it is, whatever we've decided this is the direction we're going in, how do we pick that person? It might be somebody in the family. It might not. I've worked with I've worked with clients who the son was not like the current generation. He's actually second generation, typical CEO out there hustling, grinding, making connections, doing all the rest of it. His son is much more a process orientated person, not the out there CEO type. So what they've done, they're hiring in a CEO, an external hired gun, and that guy is getting, or that girl, who they haven't finished the process yet, but that person is going to be tasked to build the company up from about 4.5 to, let's say, 12 million in 8 years or something like that. And the son is going to be the COO, working hand in glove, side by side. And then once they get to that point and it's about maintenance, the CEO gets a golden parachute, off they go to work somewhere else, and the son will step in as the CEO and manage it and maintain it. So there's lots of different ways that you can think about how we can play to the strengths of the next generation. The third P then is prepare. This is the longest one. Prepare it can be external stuff. It can be going off and getting, maybe not an MBA, but going off and getting an education and doing what you need to do, working elsewhere, or working from the ground up as low as possible and working their way up with a little bit of mentoring. But where there's the next stage, and you talked about the employees being a little bit resentful. The next stage is then promote. So promote is two meanings. First of all, you've got to hand over the baton. The next generation has to actually be given the authority. But the second meaning of promote then is to be their biggest cheerleader. You, as the current generation, have to be the one who's going, no, Mary's making that decision. I fully agree with Mary. You might not fully agree with Mary, but those conversations have to be had behind closed doors, publicly, because it's so easy for current employees or employees in the company to come and consult with the current generation. I'm not so sure about this. And they go, oh, well, and trying to patch things over, but actually the biggest cheerleader. And then number 5 is patience. We're dealing with humans. And it's also trying to remember when the current generation was building the business 20 years ago, it wasn't as smooth as they'd like to think it was. And it definitely, if they've written their memoirs, it definitely wasn't as smooth as they've written in the memoirs. So understanding all of that. Where we have people, there's either what I call a sibling showdown, where there's 2 people who want the pick. And then how do we, like, that goes back to the purpose. What are we aiming to do? And then who's the right person to fulfill that purpose? And then you have those conversations. But where you have people who are either not interested in the family business or they're not the right fit for the family business, that's what I call a black sheep breakout. How do we take the black sheep out of the family and set them on their own path for success? So there's all kinds of ways to do that, from career coaching, career guidance, and helping them out of the business. But it stems back to the purpose. If our purpose and if our values are, look, we're holding each other accountable, we're doing the best we can in terms of our team, in terms of our customers, in terms of everything else. If you're not living up to the KPIs, then you've got to not be getting a paycheck. You might still be on the board. You might still have shares and get a dividend and all the rest of it, but you're not getting a paycheck as well because you're not contributing.
On the flip side of that, so we talked about the person who doesn't belong there. What about, and this isn't really necessarily what you do, but I'm sure you've seen this, is what about the kid who's doing great, and he's next in line, but he just doesn't have the passion for it. He doesn't love it, and he doesn't want to be in the family business. And maybe it's not because it's the family. Maybe it's the industry. Maybe he just wants to, maybe he wants to be a surf instructor, whatever it may be, how does that shift the dynamic where, in essence, he's been, for lack of a better word, groomed, or it's been the vision of the current generation to, this is my succession plan, and suddenly he doesn't want to do it. And, he's grappling with, do I do it? Don't I do it? Don't want to hurt the business, but I don't want to be here forever.
Yeah. I have those conversations all the time. Most of the time when people reach out to me, it's the next generation that are kind of struggling with what they want to do next rather than the current generation. I don't know what it's like where you are, but in Ireland, there was for a long, long time, a lot of small businesses would be called O'Neill's and Sons or O'Brien's and Sons.
Sure.
And it's basically, as soon as the first son was born, the name was changed from O'Neill's Mechanics to O'Neill's and Sons. So, I mean, you've no choice. Thankfully, those days are kind of gone and people do have more choice. But there's plenty of times when the next generation, they're just not interested in what the business is doing. And that can be a real, almost a stab in the heart to the current generation who might see the business, the family business, as the third child. They have 2 kids and they have actually, this is the third child who we had before we had you in grades. So, and then it's an understanding of, okay, well, what's the purpose? And then what's the pick? And if this person is not the pick, there's 4 things that can happen with the family business when the current generation either passes away or decides to retire, decides to close. The first is to stop. Business just closes, boom, shutters down. The second is sell. Plenty of companies that can help you with sell. The third, which is my least favorite, is survive. It's putting the wrong person in place to oversee the business. And if they're not passionate about it, if they don't want to build it or they're not the right person, really all that is a very long, prolonged, drawn out and painful stop. The fourth then is scale, which is what I work with companies for. But we have a lot of next gens who either they're not interested in one facet or the main facet of the business. So there's a couple of things that I challenge people to do in this. For the current generation, it's this thought experiment of no family member should ever join the family business. How can we make sure that the family business is positioned in a way to join the family member? How can we adjust our family business over the next 5 to 10 years? We know, okay, this is the area, this is where their strengths are. They're not like me. They need to be in this direction. And what small changes can we make to make sure that the company is running in that direction? So when next generation joins, they're really like a rocket ship. And what small changes can we make? The second thing is, so we're all familiar with the concept of a side hustle. Having a project or having a business on the side. What I like to get next generations to do is to build an inside hustle. What's a product? What's a service? What's an add-on? What's something that the company's not doing right now? it's a great way for the next generation to really learn the business, learn the industry without risking everything. They're taking one thing. If it works, it can be merged back in, and it could even become the main thing. I've plenty of stories of where this inside hustle has actually become the main business and the rest of it has been sold off. But if it doesn't work, it can be just left to die on the vine and off we go. Next generation has learned something, and then what can we do and what can we adjust? So there's plenty of ways that a company, if they're open to it, can pivot their purpose, can adjust, can change around, and make sure that the next generation is set up. They could, of course, go off. I mean, I'm at a thing here today in the university with all these young entrepreneurs that are starting their own businesses, and maybe that's the appeal. Maybe somebody wants to start fresh, do something completely different. Brilliant. How can we then help get them set up for success? Give them whatever we can, but the business continues in whatever guise, and maybe a nephew, or maybe somebody else, or maybe it's a management buyout. There's all kinds of things can happen.
Yeah. Now, management styles among any two people can be very different. Yeah. But obviously, between a parent and a child, they can be very different too, especially because generationally, just things are different. Mm-hmm. And what a younger person might view as essential, an older generation might not. And I'll give you one example that's very big here, and that is, working in office versus remote or hybrid and things like that. Yeah. How is that conflict dealt with when, even if the senior passes it down to a child, but is still someone involved in the business and is in a direct conflict with how they want to run the business? Now, I know you mentioned before about not having those discussions in public, but having them in private. Yeah. But when there's more philosophical differences, though, whether the discussions, doesn't matter where it is in private, though, how are those worked through?
Mm-hmm. So for me, a lot of that is also whether it's your family business or not, or whether you're selling a business, there's a little bit of work that needs to be done emotionally with a founder or with a current generation to have them understand that really once the reins have been passed, that's it. Like you get no more say in it. Even if you're a normal, if you're a traditional business and you sell to somebody else, and you might even be on an earn out, or you might be working for a couple of years to stay on, they can make dramatic changes and they can make big changes. And unfortunately, it's once you've handed over, it has to be beyond your control. I've spoken with a lot of people who have become, in the corporate side of things, they become a chairman of the board instead of being the CEO or something like that. And they have to have this mentality of, I no longer have day-to-day operations in the business. So even if I reach across, I'm missing something. So what I try to get people to do is to still keep the next generation or the current generation in the loop. So when the next generation becomes the current generation, then the previous generation is still in the loop. But what I get them to do is to share milestones, not footsteps, because they need to see big picture stuff, how it's working, but not necessarily the nuanced detail.
I think most business decisions now, and I'm sure it comes into play with this too, has to start thinking about how AI influences these decisions. Yep. And again, I'm going to stereotype. Younger people are generally more technology focused, technology driven, and I'm sure there's exceptions to the rule. Yep. But for the most part, not only are we talking about management styles, now we're perhaps talking about how we're doing business. I mean, whether it's automating a process, whether it's getting rid of some employees, whether it's reallocating those employees because it's being replaced by AI. How are those discussions taking place?
So it really depends on the mentality of the current generation and how much they're willing to see how the world is changing and how flexible they are with it. One of the things, funny enough, on the panel that we were discussing today with education and entrepreneurship, where a lot of the COVID generation, where they might be technologically savvy and they're really comfortable with all the AI tools and all the digital tools and everything else, but they're not so good with the collaboration. They're not so good with the interpersonal stuff. And that can be, if you're shifting from everybody's been in the factory floor, everybody's been in the office, and there's an open plan thing except for the CEO that has a closed office and all the rest of it, to moving fully remote, that's such a massive cultural shift. Correct. That all of this needs to be done intentionally to understand, with the purpose of the business, where are we going? What do we need to do? And then what are the skill sets that we need to develop? Because there is. I'm a big advocate for hybrid working. Most of my team are hybrid. Two of my team have never set foot in Ireland. But at the same time, there is a little bit of that nuance which is lost. The water cooler conversation that just happens as people naturally connect. So long as you're being intentional about it and how you're trying to combat these things, there's a lot more options. But again, it depends on where the current generation sees the purpose and where the next generation sees the purpose. How can we get those aligned for the first at least couple of years?
Yeah. So changing gears for a second, I know you're in the process of working on some books. So your future career, which is about helping students and young professionals navigate early stages of their careers, hiring the right people, complete guide for hiring with clarity, confidence, and culture, and build a killer family business without killing your family. Love that title. I know we've kind of talked about those. So the third one kind of goes along with kind of a lot what we've been talking about now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The other two kind of leads me to the point now, you're kind of, in addition to just doing your family business consulting, you're also consulting with businesses in general about how to be the best they could be. And I think part of that is also training what I'll call the potential workers and how them to navigate their career, because if they're going to places that aren't right for them, it's a waste of time for them, and it's a cost and a waste of time for the business as well. So really getting the working class to have a better understanding of what's right for them, not only helps them, but it helps the businesses as well.
So one of the things that, and these statistics, is depends on who you're talking to or which reports you're reading, but definitely 60% of your waking time is spent either at work or thinking about work. And your waking time includes in the shower, doing grocery shopping, like all of that time. 60% of your waking time is either at work or thinking about work. And depending on which report you read, it's either 52% or 87% of people are unhappy in their jobs. That is a horrendous way for us to be living. So where we come in is we try to help people find their ideal career. Where are they interested in? What are they good at? And where is their demand that they can hit their stride? And on the flip side of that, then for companies, how can they hire the right people? How can they look at the personalities, the abilities, the interests to make sure that they have the right people in the right seats so as they're able to really grow their business and to do the things that they want to accomplish based on the purpose of the business. So we sit on both sides of that table. And for the ideal career, where we start was if you have the interest, the aptitude, and there is a demand for it, we'd look at those three circles overlapping. If you have the interest in something and you're good at it, but there's no demand, people won't pay you for it, that's a hobby. If you have the ability or if you have the interest in doing something and people get paid to do it, but you are not good enough for it, that's a dream.
Sure.
If you are able to do something and people will pay you to do it, you just don't really care about it, that's a job. But where we get those three intersecting, where you're interested in something, you're good at it, and people are willing to pay you for it, that's where you start to hone in on what's my ideal career.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. From a business perspective, and we'll wrap this up in a few minutes, it kind of goes along with these lines.
I could talk all day about this stuff.
I know you can. I can tell you're very passionate about it, which is wonderful. If I'm a human resource director, or I'm the one in charge of a hiring process, you can look on a resume and you can see qualifications, whether it's education, previous work experience, soft skills, whatever that may be. And you say, you know what? They're good for the job right now. But when you're looking to bring someone in the long term, and obviously the objective is you don't want to be replacing someone every 2 to 3 years. You want to get someone in and you love them to be a lifer. What should someone look for in an interview process from a business perspective that might give them a better idea that this person isn't just great now and isn't just great on paper, but potentially has long-term potential at the firm?
So that actually starts with you as the interviewer or as the HR person, because for me, HR is a fundamentally important part of the culture of the business and the future of the business. Understanding where the business is going gives you an idea of, okay, we don't just need a body in this chair right now. We're actually growing in this direction, and we need people that are more task orientated, or we need people who are more strategic thinking, or we need people who are more people focused. So understanding where we're looking to develop those people. I love my framework. So I've built a framework around hiring the right people. So if you are able to scope or spec the role where before you even hire, you're able to clearly identify what are the skills, what's the personality, what's the expectations, and what's the culture fit that we're looking for. That means that the wrong people won't apply and the right people will apply. You might have fewer candidates, but they'll be the right candidates.
Yeah.
Then when you're talking to them, you're looking for talent. So the traits, the aptitude, the learning, enthusiasm, nurture, and team fit. Where do they all fit in on that? And then how can are they somebody who can be nurtured to build themselves up?
I think the problem is we do a lot of interviewing here, obviously, like any business.
Mm-hmm.
And think about it. You have a book on it. People have classes, seminars. There's everything online now. How to nail the interview.
Mm-hmm.
How to answer the question. How many times you see something? How do you answer the question? What's your biggest weakness? How do you answer the question? And so forth like that. So how do you know if someone just isn't a really good interviewee?
Yeah.
Versus genuine answers, because really out there's a guide right now. Now I can try and throw a curveball question, but for the most part, people are trained, and colleges do it now. They have you come in for mock interviews, and they're telling you don't answer it this way. So, quote unquote, professional hirers or professional HR people are teaching people how to answer a business's question before they even get in there.
Yeah.
How do I know what's genuine? How do I know what's rehearsed?
So yeah, I mean, really, when it comes down to it, the only way to interview anybody is competency-based interviews. And give me examples of what's been done before. Give me examples of how you've done it. Let me see what kind of situations that you've been in that are relevant to the role that we're looking for. So tell me about a time when you had an issue with a coworker. Might not be a coworker. It could be somebody on your football team when you were in school. Tell me about a time when you led a project. Again, doesn't need to be a CIO level project. It's tell me about the times and how you dealt with that. Now, when we're training people to do interviews, and we do this, we train the interviewers and we train the interviewees. It's all about enthuse and relate. So you need to be spending your time either showing that you give a damn about the job, and it's not just this will pay my rent for the next couple of months.
Yeah.
Or that you have the related experience or the related skills. They might not be exactly related, but this is why people can move from role to role. So in the interview process, if you're matching everybody with the same questions and getting that same kind of information from people, you're able to tell a little bit more about the person. Now, the best way to get actual insights into people is to use psychometric assessments and things that are validated, like Big Five. I'm not really talking about Myers-Briggs or DISC. For me, they're too binary. You need to see where people are on a scale. But that gives people, look, these things can be gamed as well, but they're much harder because most of them have validity things built into them. So it's just people answering, and then you're saying, well, what I want as we look at the future of this business, I want people who are a little bit more socially bold, or I want people who are a little bit more creative or less creative, because we want this to be. So understanding what's the type of person you're looking for, having people do a simple psychometric assessment could take 20 minutes, 30 minutes for them to do it. And then they come in for interview, and you also have a lot more insights into, okay, I can see naturally that you are inclined to this, or I can see potentially people who score the same way as you have an issue with these things. What kind of skills have you built up to counterbalance this potential tendency to get bored easily because you're creative?
Interesting. And do you recommend, when a company is interviewing someone, do you recommend, and obviously it depends on the level of the position, I realize, do you recommend having people that are in your firm that have different views or similar views? Because we could both interview the same candidate, and I can love them and someone else might not love them for really the same reason.
So this is where it all comes back to competency based. So what's the role? I mean, you can have two people. You can have, I don't believe in pure introvert and extrovert. We're all ambiverts, but you can have somebody who's much more people orientated, who loves the connection with the person. And you can have somebody who's more data driven, who doesn't really connect with the person, but actually the role is more data driven. So it all comes back to the competency. What's the person being expected to do? How can they be set up for success? Because you put somebody who's going to be distracting to all the other people that are in there getting their head down to do this particular role. It's going to be horrendous. But one of the interviewers has gone, well, obviously we get this a lot when we get HR people to learn about psychometrics and selection. HR people are people. Like they want to be developing people, but there's some roles, very technical roles a lot of the time, or numbers roles or things like that, where the people who are drawn to it because they're not very personal, like they enjoy the process, they enjoy the digging down into the rationality of it. they don't have time for this frivolous talk about your feeling stuff. So it can be harder to connect, but they would be absolutely phenomenal at the role. And if we look at it from a pure competency based point of view, what are the competencies we need for this person, for a person to do well in this role? And how does this person match against them? That's the way to do it.
Interesting. A lot of good stuff there. I like it. I agree with what you said. I could talk to you for hours about this because it is really fascinating stuff. But how can people follow you, or when are your books coming out? So people who want to learn more.
So the first book is the talk is Build a Killer Family Business Without Killing Your Family. It's the structure of a book is there, but it's mostly the talk right now and coaching. But the book, Your Future Career, I'm hoping to have out for September, published and out for people in September. But all of my information is, the easiest place is probably stephenshortt.com, STEPHENSHORTT, and all of the information is there.
And you're on LinkedIn, same thing. You're on Instagram, same thing, and so forth. Well,
It's
listen, I enjoy being across the world. You know,
I will. Thank you very much.
I like I said, I am a little jealous, but it's been a pleasure talking to you, and I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On-Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.